So, welcome to the VivoEdChat. My name's Colin Brown, Director of Engagement at Vivo Rewards. And this afternoon we're joined by Claire Young, who is an entrepreneur and apprentice finalist and works across schools across the country. So, good afternoon, Claire.
Good afternoon, and I'm absolutely delighted that you've asked me to be a panelist on one of your weekly webinars. I am an entrepreneur. I've got my own business working with schools across the country. My main passion is working with young people of all ages, primary schools, secondary schools, colleges and universities on business and enterprise. This webinar is all going to be about how to make your school more enterprising, and I think one of the biggest influences which young people have when talking to them about enterprise is the first slide which you'll see is TV shows such as The Apprentice or Dragon's Den. Normally when I'm in a classroom talking to young people, I ask them to name an entrepreneur, and the gentleman on the slide, Lord Alan Sugar, is the person which they name. And I think programs like The Apprentice have had a positive impact in the respect that it's made being your own boss something which is very aspirational, it's something which is achievable, it's something which they're interested in, and I think that's what's really important when working with young people, that you've got to engage them to get their attention, to get them motivated in what they're working in. And lots of young people do want to be their own boss now. It's not something which is restricted to being in a boardroom and being a man in a suit, as we see all the people on the slides. If you're doing an apprenticeship and you're going to be a mechanic, for example, would you like to be self-employed one day, and would you like to have your own boss? This picture was taken at number 10 Downing Street, and Lord Sugar and I work on a number of projects together. This one was a meeting about backing young Britain, and at this event it typically sort of summarises what my business life is like. That I did walk in the room and the majority of people did look like Lord Sugar, male in a suit, and obviously I break that stereotype. I'm a young woman in business, and interestingly last year we saw the biggest increase in entrepreneurs of startup businesses was 16 to 24-year-olds. So I'm really keen to work with young people to banish this stereotype that to be an entrepreneur and to have your own business you've got to be a white man in a suit of a certain age from a certain background. That enterprise and entrepreneurship is there for everybody, and it's actually the young entrepreneurs which is starting to see the real surge in the country. When I'm working with students and I ask them what's the first thing you need to start a business, lots of them may say to me, money was actually the very first thing you need to start an enterprise project is an idea. And lots of people think that creativity is restricted to being able to dance on the stage or draw or arrange flowers in this sort of stereotypically creative concept. But I'm none of those things, but I'm very good at problem solving, I'm good at spotting gaps in the market and thinking on my feet, and that's what enterprise is all about. Having an idea, and an idea costs you absolutely nothing because hopefully it comes from your brains, and then actually working on the big 13 enterprise skills, which you can see on this slide, which are all available on the internet if you Google the big 13 enterprise skills. So the things which young people see watching The Apprentice, that you are thrown together at 5 o'clock in the morning and you've got to work as a team, you've got to use your initiative, you've got to be really positive, effective communication, all those are the things. So having an idea and working on the big 13 enterprise skills, which for me are really important to develop young people. It's actually, when you're talking to employers, they are the skills which they are wanting to see. So you've got a group of students who really want to work on an enterprise project. They've got a great idea. They want to work as teams and want to develop their 13 enterprise skills. And then sometimes it can be a bit daunting to actually know where to start. And lots of these organisations on this slide are there to help you. So the purple badge, which says Tycoon, that was set up by Peter Jones, the dragon from Dragon's Den. And that, if you Google Tycoon in schools, the application process is once a year and you can access up to £1,000 funding to start a business. You've got Young Chamber of Commerce, which I'm actually the president for, and they've got a fantastic programme which works in schools. At the top of the slide, you've got Unlimited with the orange asterisk, and that's got a programme for teenagers called Unlimited Live, and that's all about creating social entrepreneurs. So social entrepreneurs is a term which is used a lot in the newspapers and in the radios, and young people have heard of it but don't really know what it means, and it's creating entrepreneurs who can have a positive social impact. So have a business which is profitable, it's sustainable, but it's going to help somebody in your community, whether it's helping women or old people or younger people. We are crying out as a society at the moment for social entrepreneurs. Not every young person wants to have their own business, but I think it's really important that enterprise education really ties in with what the top 100 employers are wanting from their young workforce. A survey which was done in 2011 by the top 100 employers, they were asked, what skills would you like from your young workforce? And it's interesting to see on the next slide that the very first point which they wanted was an entrepreneurial mindset. So they want young people who are going to come in and think on their feet, use their initiative. If you see a phone ringing in an office, that you'll actually use your initiative to pick it up and answer it. I think the second point is really important because the younger generation are immersed in technology. They're WhatsApping, they're BBMing, they're Snapchatting, texting, Facebooking, tweaking, texting, but actually having a conversation and good communication skills is always really important in enterprise. All of those things on that slide, but I think the last one's really important, that working on enterprise projects, you are working with circumstances out of your control, things which you've never done before, and at times things might go wrong, and there might be failure. I lost The Apprentice in front of 10 million people on TV, but you've got to develop a thick skin as you leave school, because it's a tough world out there, and I think being emotionally robust is a key point which I'll learn working on enterprise projects. I was nicknamed lots of things when I took part in The Apprentice, a motor mouth, a chatterbox, and Alan Sugar nicknamed me a Rottweiler because he said whatever he threw at me, I clung onto the ankles for dear life and wouldn't let go. And I think I survived 5 final boardrooms when most people would go through 1 or 2. And 3 letters, which is really important when you're working on enterprise projects, is a USP, a unique selling point. So how is your idea going to stand out? How is it special? How does it compete versus what else is in the market? And what is really going to be the wow factor about it? So all your enterprise ideas, the first thing you need to say to a set of students is, what is its USP and why are people going to use it? I think it's also important for students to remember that they've all got a good USP. So in an enterprise team, think of your team as a machine, and are you playing to everybody's strengths? So have you got somebody who's a good presenter, somebody who's a good creator, somebody who's analytical, somebody who's a timekeeper, and really think about the team USP and if you're working properly together. I'm often asked that I'm 34 years old and I've got a great business and I work on lots of projects with the government to do with enterprise education. Was I always like this? Well, the picture taken on the left-hand side, I was about 3 or 4 years old, and the irony of being called a motor mouth and a chatterbox in later life, I didn't say a single word until I was about 4. And my first memories were actually in a primary school for special needs, being filmed on communication to see how I did talk, well, not talk, but communicate with other children. And then one day I started talking, and it literally did not stop. My poor mother said that if she'd had me first, she would never have had any more children. And I was brought up in a very hard-working family, that if you wanted anything in life, you go and do it. And I think I was taught to be very enterprising from my mum, who at the age of 9 showed me how to use an iron. And I used to do 2 big bins of ironing for 50p. And then I sold sweets at school and sold other things at school. And that was really my first start of being an entrepreneur and having part-time jobs the whole way through from being 15 years old. If I wanted anything and if I wanted money, and talking to young people on enterprise projects, that's a huge driver for them. If you want things, you've got to go out there and work for them. I'm a big believer that young people become who they surround themselves with, and if you surround yourselves with divs, you become a div. And really for me, growing up, these were my 3 role models, and I think role models are absolutely key when working with students. I do a lot of work in schools with teenage girls who I'm maybe sometimes the first woman they've ever met who actually goes out to work, and the fact that I've got my own business, that's just a different level. These 3 women, I used to come home and watch Oprah Winfrey, and Oprah Winfrey is the most successful black woman globally. She does a lot of work for girls in South Africa on education, a phenomenal woman. The lady in the pink is my mum, and she taught me what's Nike's slogan, which is just do it. So don't just talk about it. Don't just have a dream, because if you have a dream without a plan, you're never going to get there. And the lady in the middle with the grey hair is my headmistress, a lady called Pat Langham. And every morning in assembly, we were a school in Wakefield. Wakefield's a very normal place. We're very normal students. She told us we were the best and the brightest and go out there and succeed. And I think the most important person to believe that is yourself, because if you can't go out there and promote yourself, and that's something which you have to do in enterprise, you have got to go out there and promote your business, because if you don't do it, nobody will do it for you. I work with students on enterprise projects and awareness of role models, and on this slide here, probably if I gave this to year 10s, they would be able to name 80% of these people within 2 minutes. So number 15, who's Mark Zuckerberg, the world's youngest billionaire who's created Facebook, to number 20, who's Steve Jobs, who created Apple, to number 9 at the top with the blonde hair, J.K. Rowling. And it's really interesting to look at their stories, where they've come from, who they are, and to visually see that entrepreneurs come in all different shapes and sizes. And there's just no barriers. If you want to be an entrepreneur and if you want to start an enterprise project, you need a really good idea and you need that drive and conviction to make it happen. I've met some very successful people over the last couple of years, and the common denominator across all of them is you never hear them making excuses. And that's something about enterprise projects, that there's no hiding. You're working away from a classroom, you're working on real life projects, and there's nowhere to hide for excuses. And that's something which I really encourage with the students. If you want to make something to happen, you just need to do it. These are some of the challenges which I come across working with enterprise projects, particularly when we do mixed school events, working with people who they don't know. There's disagreements during negotiations, dealing with the unexpected. There can be lots of young people who shy away from the number side of enterprise, and it's really important for them to understand basic maths so they know what profit they're making in their project. And I know for teachers, the challenges they have is there's not enough time, it might not be a priority, and actually if somebody gives them an enterprise project, they're not sure what to do with it. When I'm working with young people, really encourage them to be like meerkats. When I'm interviewing people, I want to see bright, alert, ready to go and to grab opportunities. And meerkats, they are very bright, they're fantastic team workers, and they grab opportunities. And that's something which I really want to encourage students to do. And working on enterprise, there's loads of opportunities for them. These are some of the ideas which I've worked with schools across the country. Disco and prom night is really popular. Movie night, where students pay to come and watch a film, and then you can sell drinks and popcorn and different things inside. Cake sales always work really well. To do a cake sale maybe once on a Friday to keep it fresh and exciting. People who do nail painting and henna. £5 Blossom, which is a fantastic project which has been generated from Hull. If you Google it, all the details will come up. A swap shop. And Ryman's, the stationery shop, now does a great student project where the students can run a stationery shop inside the school, and it's great because students always need stationery. Now, once they've got an idea, so I went to work, when I left university, I went to work for a marketing giant, L'Oreal, which we see on TV, advertising, Facebook and billboards. And then you've got to, when you've got your idea, is to create a brand about it. So you've got to give your project a name. And then this is the bit which the students always like doing, is creating a logo. And again, if I showed this to students, did this with primary school students not long ago, they could name most of these logos in about 2 minutes. So designing, coming up with a name, coming up with a logo, and then coming up with a slogan. So I'm loving it, McDonald's, think different, which is Apple, it's not for girls, Yorkie. So really getting them to think about what their business is about, and having a visual identity. Now, once you've got all of those things, you've got to start telling your target customer, which I would imagine is the students within the school. So a typical school will have 1,000 students within the building for 6 hours a day. In an ideal world, these are the places where you would advertise. But when you're working with schools, you've got to think about what you can use inside the school to tell people about your idea. So can you go into assembly? Do you have tutor time? Have you got screens? Can you use the school website? Do you use social media? Lots of schools now using Facebook and Twitter. How can you get the teachers on board with you? How can you get the parents on board? So really think about all the opportunities you can do. And actually, when you work on this, normally you don't have to spend any money because it's things which you can do in the school for free. So you've got a great idea, you've got a name, you've got a logo, you've got a marketing plan, and then you've really got to think about the nuts and bolts of how you're going to make money. And this is something which Alan Sugar is always talking about in the boardroom. You've got to make profit. So for students who talk about maths and think, oh, I've got no idea why I need to learn about it, you've got to make sure that your overheads and your costs are less than what you're selling. So we always use an example of cupcakes. If you were going to do a cake business in school, what cost have you got associated with making those cakes? So you've got to make them with ingredients, you've got to make them look pretty, so display them, you've got to make them, so you're going to pay people, you need a kitchen, you need amenities. So once you top all of that up, plus your marketing plan, how much do you need to sell your cupcakes for and how many to make a profit? The job I was doing before I went to work, before I went into the Apprentice, was I was a director for Superdrug, and Superdrug is a great high street store, and it taught me a lot about how you sell products to people. It doesn't matter what you are selling, whether you are selling a mobile phone, you're selling a cupcake, you're selling a movie night, really think about your 5 Ps, and this is really basic. So the price, are you going to be expensive? Are you going to be good value? Are you going to be middle price? Your product, and that goes back to the 3 letters, your USP. Can you do a promotion? So you never want people to come and buy one product. So could you do 3 for 2, buy one, get one free, buy one, get one second half price? How can you get people to buy more? Placement, where are you going to set up your business in school? Where's the busiest place? Could you do it in the foyer? Can you do it in the restaurant? And POS is point of sale. So if you're selling cupcakes, how do you make your stand look fantastic? How can you dress it up? And it's just really worth checking the 5 Ps whenever you start on an enterprise idea. That will take you 5 minutes and give you a good structure to get moving. And then we are in a world of social media and how to promote your project, and think about how you can use the school website. If you can use a blog, lots of students have created their own websites. They buy their company URL, which is the name of the business, for about £10 a year, and they build a brochure website for free through programs on the internet. You can use social media, which again is all free. They might have business cards made, or you can do them at school. They'll set up an email and have an auto signature. And some schools I work with actually go to networking groups or have started networking groups within inside the school to get businesses to come in. So starting a business, super exciting. There's going to be lots of moments where I recently skydived, and when you open the door of a plane and you see bright blue sky and there's no land, your instinct is to go back to the back of the plane and go down. But working on enterprise projects, there will be lots of wobble moments, but it's one of those things you really just have got to go for it. If anybody wants to contact me, you can tweet me at Claire L. Young. My LinkedIn is Claire Young 1978, and if anybody wants to email me any questions about enterprise or potentially visiting their school, please do get in touch, and I'll be more than happy to help you. So I hope that was useful. If anybody would like to ask me a question, I'll hand back over to Colin.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. That was fantastic. Absolutely. We've had lots of questions come in, so we'll just take a few minutes to just answer those. So the first one was very much a practical question, which is, when you're actually in schools, what are you trying to achieve? What's the format of your visits? Are you in there face-to-face? Are you Skyping in? How do you actually interact with the schools that you're working in yourself?
It really depends on the school which I am working with, because I work with a whole range of schools. I work with pupil referral units. I work with foundation students who are in secondary schools but at the bottom tier. And then on the other side of the coin, I work with top private schools with very bright, academic, motivated students. So the aim of my visit varies from school to school. A general brief could be, can you come into year 10 or year 11? We need to kick them at the backside. We need a reality check about the real world. Could you come in and work with the sixth form about their personal awareness and how about careers how to apply for a job, can you do a CV work session, or I could be working with year 3 primary school students and year 6 primary school students who I was working with last week on setting up an enterprise project where those students were given £100 per form, and by the end of the school year they're going to turn that £100 into £250 for a local charity. So the aim really does vary depending who I'm working with and where I'm working with them, but normally a general brief is, can you come in and give them a reality check and a kick up the backside.
That's good. A reality check and a kick up the backside clearly needed. Some other quite practical questions, and these have come from obviously your excellent talk. You mentioned obviously trying to be role models being extremely important, and particularly role models for girls being important. Do you feel that there is a big gender difference in that whole entrepreneurial mindset? Are the boys more entrepreneurial? Are the girls less entrepreneurial? Or do both need permission to think in this way?
I think looking at role models between boys and girls, if I say to a classroom, can somebody give me 5 entrepreneurs, they will not nearly in every situation give me 5 male entrepreneurial names. So Richard Branson, Alan Sugar, Mark Zuckerberg, Theo Paphitis, Duncan Valentine. Very rarely will a classroom say to me a female entrepreneur. I think we've got a huge problem with role models going to schools, but particularly for young girls, because there is huge influence with the Only Way is ethics and the WAGs and being a celebrity is a career option. I think we're not seeing the increase in the number of women in business, 10 to 15 years down the line. And I think girls need to have a lot more role models going into school at a younger age where they are making life-changing decisions when they're 11, 12, 13, to actually have that spark and look at somebody and think, I really want to be like that person. But I am a big believer you can't be it unless you see it. I've always had very strong female role models in my life. In all the companies I've worked for, there's been very strong female leaders. I don't think there's any difference between girls and boys on how they perform on enterprise. I think if anything, the boys are probably a bit more risk-taking and a bit more gung-ho, but I do think it does come a lot down to role models.
And equally, there's another interesting question that's come in around, which links to that. We ran an article earlier in the week around money habits. So the idea being, from research being conducted across the UK, that you saw habits related to finance being pretty much established by the time that someone was 7 years old, which echoes your point in the fact that you need to get into those schools early and really make sure the mindset is right. Have you seen any other attitudinal changes in schools? Because obviously you're working with lots of different year groups. Are they, and you've said potentially boys are more risk-taking, do you see a change in attitudes over time? So that's a particular question around attitudes over time.
Firstly, I've recently been asked to mentor on a project in South London where there's been chains of single, unemployed teenage mums, and they're working on 3 to 4 generations, and they really want to break that cycle, and the age at which they've identified to break that cycle to work with the young girls is at 7 years old. So that's quite interesting that age is tied in with what you were talking about. I think schools which really embody enterprise, which I have worked with across the country, you can really see that it uplifts the whole school, they flourish. There is more of a not risk-taking, but we'll just have a go, and if it doesn't work, we'll learn why it didn't work, and what's the worst which could happen. So some of the schools which I work in, which are very academic, they perform excellently in your standard qualifications, but the students, when you put them into assessment centres where they've got to work in teams, they've got to speak up, they've got to do bright interviews, they fall back. So there is a really cross-selection across the country, which I am lucky enough to see because I do work in so many different schools.
A couple more questions, and then I think we'll probably need to leave it there because they're coming in thick and fast. You mentioned a number of times in your presentation around the really clear need to have that understanding or confidence with numbers, those basic maths skills, literacy as well, but basic math skills. Is that a real blockage to people moving forward? Is that something where the school system is kind of not failing but struggling?
I think it's relating the what's in the classroom to everyday life, and it's going back to engaging students. And some people may say it's tough, they're at school, they've got to learn, and that's the end of it. Well, lots of students fall out of the classroom because they're bored, they don't they don't really understand the relevance of why they're learning about maths, and they don't really understand about literacy, why it's important. And when you actually say, well, you've got to be able to write, because if you want to place an advert in a newspaper about your business, who's going to write it for you? Who's going to send an email to a potential customer if you can't write it? So you've got this great idea, you've got a brilliant business. How do you know if you're making money? And normally when I'm doing, and I wouldn't say it's across, I can pinpoint any age group, but whenever I'm working on an enterprise task, it's normally the bullet points about the finance. So you've got to tell me about how much you're going to sell your item for, how many do you want to sell, what are the startup costs. That is the one point which all the students always want to shy away from, and it's the least one which anybody wants to put themselves forward to do. There's a real barrier to numbers. And actually, once you sit down and start going through it, they say, oh, really, this isn't very difficult. It's not difficult, but it's something, personal finance as well, students really should know about by the time they leave school.
Very interesting from a very simple Vivo perspective. Obviously, the Vivo system encourages them to have gain points for particular behaviors, and it's effectively an online bank account. Where they can choose to reward themselves or they can choose to reward others. Which brings me to the last point, question that's raised. How important is it to have a kind of local project for the students to really work on? You mentioned a couple in terms of either charitable projects within the school or a school shop or a school stationery or even selling tickets to the school disco and prom. So how important is it the ability to kind of take that dream and then quickly action it?
I think it's really important to have a project which engages the students, because lots of times I've been into schools and they've got, the teachers or the parents have great ideas, but it's relating to what they're interested in. And when you actually put it in front of a group of 13 or 14-year-olds, they look at you and go, but miss, it's really boring. They're not going to work after school or in lunchtime on something which they're not engaged in. You've got to use their value system. And I think lots of people underestimate what young people are capable of doing. Some projects I see can be a little bit patronising and say, design a soft drink. When they say, well, miss, this is never going to happen. I think giving them real life responsibility. So you are going to be fundraising for a charity which is based 2 streets away from the school. This is why we're doing it. You're going to visit the charity, and in 3 months' time, you're actually going to be presenting a cheque to them, giving them responsibility, giving them contact with the outside world, because enterprise is about communication and dealing with other groups. It's not just being kept in the bubble of school. And I think it's good for students to have that awareness.
We've had some great examples in terms of our system where 1 in 7 transactions on the system is actually a donation to charity, and actually students choosing to donate as a year group, as a school, to local charities, but then actioning it and presenting that check at the end. Well, thank you very much, Claire. I think you've delivered an excellent webinar. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for everybody who's dialed in and some really great questions. Sorry I couldn't get through them all, but we'll end the session now. And as I said, the session will be recorded and available on the Vivo website later tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much. Thank you.